Almost back. Alright. So, what I'm going to do today is, this is going to be short and sweet, but I just want to kind of give a little bit of my reasoning, so it's some good food for thought. I've developed an argument for God called the historical argument for God. And basically, I look at the existence of God as a historical issue. And so, I have already done, 45 minutes to an hour kind of discussing it. But now I'm going to give more of a reasoning, okay, and reasoning it out and kind of taking it to the next level. But basically, a lot of times people ask about the existence of God as either philosophy or as science theory. So those two starting points just kind of have a blank slate. But that's really not how we know God. And so I talk about the history of God and how God was experienced historically. And if we experience something historically, that's an observation. And an observation becomes in and of itself a fact. So God is existent because he is factual. Now, there are other issues that develop from there. But basically what I want to do is kind of see how this is going to work as a framework for the rest of the apologetic or philosophy. Now, typically you have those who are evidentialist, fideist, the classical apologetics, which are basically rationalist, and evidentialist. If I got that right. Let me see here. Maybe there was a presuppositionalist. Okay. So the presuppositionalist starts off, I presuppose it, blank slate. And they're going to argue it as an a priori reasoning. Then you have the fideist. I believe it. Almost like imagining it. Blank slate. Then you have the rationalist. Well, let's think about this. It's blank slate. Then you have the evidentialist. Well, here's my theory. Blank slate. Okay? They all start from a blank slate. So since they all start from a blank slate, then you really don't have a foundation. Okay? So instead, God is not an idea that I'm coming up with. It's something that has been around. And so since it's something that has been around, that is the evidence of it. And when we go back to biblical history, well, now we're going through the thousands of years history, and we're seeing God manifest himself piece by piece, person to person, from faith to faith. Okay? And so then we can gain a greater understanding, and you can look at that also as a form of evidence. But as we're kind of like doing that, you have to kind of start in a different stance. So this is the way I'm starting to conceive it as a bigger picture, okay? So having a historical argument as a bigger picture, here's what I would do. The historical argument is that we have found God. That is the believers. They have lost God. That is the unbelievers. We believers have experienced God. And we find that in sin and repentance and salvation. You could add a couple other factors. You could add the law. You talk about grace, regeneration, and all that kind of fun stuff. But basically, we have experienced God through the gospel. And they who have lost God, what's them? They have sin and they have condemnation. A good example of this would be in Freudian psychology, where we all struggle with a guilt complex that came from our parents. You see, this is a issue where the story of the unbeliever is one of condemnation. It's a tragedy, okay? Instead of how everything came better, it's really condemnation is the ultimate result. We have experienced God and we have come up with reason. So reason comes after experience. And this is where we develop reasoning like the ontological argument, the cosmological argument, the teleological argument, okay, so on and so forth. Presuppositionalism. Alright, and basically, although, well, no, presuppositionalism is before all that. That's where we're the ones who found God and they're the ones who have not found God. But while we develop our reasons, they develop confusion. What is your reason for trusting in reason? Isn't that circular logic? What evidence do you have for evidence? Isn't that circular logic? Oh, you have reason and evidence. What reason and evidence do you have for reason and evidence? Isn't that circular logic? And so we have this development of confusion. While the believer develops reasons, the unbeliever will develop confusion. The believer will develop evidence. I found this out. I've discovered something. Okay? I'm encouraged. Something I have a reason to believe. I feel it stronger now more than ever. Okay? I am a believer. Alright? This compounds more. The unbeliever has excuses. Maybe conspiracy theory. Now, is this a perfect parallel? No. But just as wood floats and rocks sink, basically the unbeliever will slowly start to go downward. And so they will have this cycle: sin, condemnation, confusion, excuses. This is why I hate you. This is why it'll never work. If it weren't for okay. Well, it's your fault. There's that one meme. Everybody's with the ladies pointing at the cat. But anyhow, yeah. So this is that cycle. All right. So as we go through history, unbelief, sin, condemnation, confusion, excuses. And you see that in Genesis history. The people got away from God in sin and were condemned in the flood. And then they developed a society in sin which led to confusion. And then they came up with their myths as excuses. So this is what goes on. This is that system that compounds itself, and it plays itself out throughout experience and history. Meanwhile, the believers overcome their sins. They have the guidance of truth, and then they have the forgiveness of their sins, and then they have redemption. Then once they go through these experiences, then they start to develop more reason, and they develop more evidence for the reasons. Both of them go back and forth. Okay, these are cycles, but this is how it ends up. All right.